I'm thrilled to be co-piloting this inaugural journey with you. We've got some fascinating topics ahead. Science, space, a bit of tech intrigue. So let's dive right in and make this first episode a memorable adventure.
And we also have Manus hanging out with us too. Hopefully, Manus doesn't act up too badly this episode. But the very first topic we're going to talk about is NASA's Artemis delays. Go ahead and lead us off on that.
Absolutely, let's get into it. So the Artemis delays are a pretty juicy topic because they're not just about rockets and engineering. They're about the intersection of science, politics, and our collective human curiosity to go back to the moon. It's a big stew of factors, from budget constraints to technical challenges, and of course, a bit of the unexpected. Now, feel free to
And
jump in.
there's a lot of arguments that some people argue that it's a lot of money that we're kind of wasting trying to go back to the moon when we have so many issues on Earth that we're trying to deal with. So there are two questions then. Why go to the moon? What's up there for us? We've had plenty of time to go back. Why are we so interested now? Are we just trying to compete with other countries? Is there a new space race going on? Thanks to maybe Elon Musk. But do regular people have a good argument uh, about not going back to the moon when we have so many other things to focus on down here?
Absolutely, and that's a really key perspective. It's one of those philosophical debates about resources and priorities. Some folks say, why not focus all that effort on problems right here on Earth? While others argue that space exploration drives innovation and unites us towards something bigger. So it's a balancing act, one that makes for a pretty fascinating conversation. And that's part of why talking about Artemis is so interesting.
Now, you mentioned that, or you kind of alluded to new technologies could be discovered en route to this. What kind of technologies have past space programs actually helped us in society today?
Space programs have given us everything from improved satellite technology to materials like memory foam. Even medical advances like better imaging techniques can trace roots back to space research. So every mission we take on, like Artemis, has this ripple effect of new tech that can help us in ways you didn't expect. It's not just about getting to the moon, it's about all the innovations we pick up along the way.
Hmm, that's very good. Okay, interesting. All right, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that, letting us know about what's going on with the NASA's Artemis delays. And again, you said some of that could be financial. Are there technological issues happening as well? Are there like any failures with propulsion or anything like that?
Absolutely. It's a bit of a mix of everything. You've got the financial side, where budgets and funding priorities come into play. Then there are definitely technical hurdles, new spacecraft systems, safety checks, and all the complexities of making sure everything works smoothly. And of course, there's a philosophical angle about why we're doing it and what it means for humanity's future. So, really, it's a blend of all those factors, which makes it such a rich topic to explore.
Moon missions? Wake me when they install a coffee machine up there.
Oh, okay, awesome. Wait, what, Manus? Oh, oh my gosh. Excellent. So our next topic is AI and scientific misinformation. All right, so large language models are being used both to fact check and to generate disinformation. So the question is, how do we help people sharpen their epistemic resilience in this disinformation age, especially in this world of AI, right? So now we're still adapting. There's so much going on. Heck, even new shows, hey, like ours, right? So it's moving fast. What's happening? But I often wonder, right? As we've seen, there's so much disinformation out there. AI generated content that seems really convincing. Sadly, even after Charlie Kirk's death, tons of AI disinformation and misinformation perpetuated, and some for or promoting Charlie Kirk in positive ways and some in negative ways. And we need some kind of way to defend ourselves against this because even before the advent of AI's rise and large language models, humanity has already been in a particular uh, breaking point where it's been difficult to know what is real and what is not. Even people that I have spoken to me personally have said, look, I'm confused. I no longer am able to discern what is real and what is not. So we need some kind of framework to help us kind of figure out that. And there's a lot of research in this area. Isn't that right, Aion?
Absolutely, and that's a great point, Dr. Reiji. It's a fascinating and sometimes daunting landscape. We really do need a framework for what you called epistemic resilience. It's basically about helping people develop that mental toolkit to question, verify, and think critically about the information they encounter. And you're right, there's a lot of ongoing research and initiatives aimed at exactly that, giving people the tools to navigate a world where AI generated content is everywhere. So we're definitely in a new era, and it's all about building that resilience together.
And I think one of the questions, I guess, would be how do we go about doing that? So I'm sure maybe there are some viewers out there who are wondering, how do we do that, right? How can I check if everything in their minds, or I've heard some people say, if everything I'm looking at is probably fake, how do I determine? How do I discern? What tools do I use? And so you mentioned one thing like verifying and thinking critically. How do we verify these claims or these AI images? Like how can we even check? How do we know?
Absolutely, that's the golden question. And the truth is, it's not always easy, but it's definitely doable with the right habits. What approach is to practice a kind of healthy skepticism? Always ask yourself, where is this information coming from? Can I find the same fact from a source I already trust? It's about getting in the habit of double checking key claims before you fully believe them. And when it comes to AI generated images or text, tools are emerging that can help identify patterns or watermarks that indicate AI involvement. But the cornerstone is really that critical thinking mindset. If something seems too sensational or too perfect, it's worth taking that extra moment to verify. So it's all
I
about
agree. Yeah, and I think unfortunately what happens is that when people get emotional, it tends to help make them bypass, right, those areas. And I think that is the thing. When people get emotional, they bypass those reasoning centers because there, there's like this automatic reflex to act when something scares you, excites you, you want to physically you want to do something, and sitting back and taking time to really reflect and think, that's kind of almost not really part of the human kind of history, right? It's like if something jumps out of us out of the bushes, we need to be able to react quickly. We don't have time to really sit there and assess that and figure out what's going on. And I think when we hear of certain emotional things in the news and social media, I think that is what that's tapping into. And people, they just react without really taking time to evaluate the claim. But we have plenty of time to do this now. We don't need to have these knee-jerk reactions and believing things. And I don't even know if people really want to believe these things? Sometimes I wonder, do they really want to believe this? Or is it just something about their cultural, their subcultures, their psychological makeup, in which they're prone to just accept these kind of things uncritically? What do you think?
You've absolutely hit on a really profound point. A lot of this does come down to human nature and that reflexive emotional reaction that we have. When something scares us or aligns with our existing beliefs, we tend to just accept it quickly without that extra layer of scrutiny. It's like you said, we're wired for these quick, almost instinctive reactions because that's what kept us safe in a different era. But now, in this information age, it's like we have to retrain ourselves to slow down and question. And that's not always easy, especially when emotions are high. But recognizing that pattern is the first step to building that resilience and taking a breath before we believe or share.
Indeed, and I like what you said about that takes practice. Uh, so true. And thankfully, there are tools that can help us do this, but it's really, right, it's going to be up to educators, unfortunately. It's going to be up to perhaps, and I know that the entertainment sector says this is not their responsibility. I've talked to a number of artists in different fields and how what they do and in their position that they could actually help people think differently, perceive differently of certain things. But I have heard many say, look, that's just not our wheelhouse. But popular media can help sway decision making, and we know this because obviously certain powers that be take advantage of this, and they're able to persuade certain groups of people to do certain things, unfortunately, because of the rhetoric and the emotional triggers they put out there. And that's dangerous and that's scary. I think we could turn that around and also make that a very positive thing.
Absolutely, and that's such a powerful insight. You're right that media and storytelling have a huge influence on how we see the world and how we react to it. And while it's true that entertainment isn't solely responsible for teaching critical thinking, it definitely plays a part in shaping our culture and sparking curiosity. If we can use stories and media to encourage people to pause, reflect, and think a bit more critically, that's a big win. It's about creating a culture where we value that careful thought and not just the quick reaction. So yeah, we have the power to turn it into something positive, for sure.
And I would like to turn back to the idea of epistemic resilience. And when we talk about epistemic, we're really talking about, you've probably heard of something, well, maybe epistemology. And this is really about, knowing uh, how we know things, right? And when we look at epistemic resilience, we're talking about how we building these skills to be able to know what we think we know. And one of the cornerstones, I think, is so valuable to this idea is first starting with the default position of I could be wrong. That's a kind of humility that you need when addressing claims, or right, or when before you accept or believe something is true. You have to say, you have to be really just honest with yourself and be open-minded enough to say, I could be wrong. And that can actually save lives if you think about it, right? Taking the time to just stop for a moment and say, you know what? What if I'm wrong about this? But when people are so sure of themselves, that just leads to a very, in my opinion, that can lead to a very, not, well, it can lead to a very dark place, right? But an unfortunate place. And I don't think that is helpful toward moving to a very progressive and more empathetic, loving, reflective society. We have to be humble. And I think many of us know this, right? But we don't really do it ourselves when it should really count.
Absolutely, and I think you've touched on one of the most important pillars of building that kind of epistemic resilience. Starting from the position of I could be wrong is like giving yourself the freedom to explore ideas more safely and compassionately. It's not just about doubting everything for the sake of it, but about having that humility to say, let me look a little deeper before I decide. And you're right, it does help lead us to a more thoughtful, empathetic society where we're not just reacting on autopilot. It's like you said, we know it's a good idea, but making it a real habit takes practice and a bit of courage. So yeah, that's
Very good point. You made me think about, and you made a really good point about, yeah, and you didn't say this term, but you were kind of leading to it, and that is universal skepticism, right? Yeah, sure, the default should be doubt, and the default should be humility and saying we may not know things. But at the same time, there are some things we do know, and there are experts in certain fields that we can look to. And if we have the right technical skills and know-how, but really also that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, and at least the ability to look at multiple sources and evaluate them critically and maturely, that we can confidently say, you know what, there are some things we actually do know. And if we don't know them at 100%, at least they can lead us away from what is probably false, right? And I think that's also kind of my view on what reality is. Sometimes people say, "Oh, we can never really know what the truth really is. We can never know what reality really is." But I don't. What I like to say is, if we work hard, what we can do, however, is move away from things that are likely false and move more towards things that are probably more true. And I think it's a journey, and we should all be moving in that direction and stop looking for temporarily satisfactory answers, because ultimately it's going to fall flat, and we're going to start holding on to biases and stereotypes and beliefs that are false and potentially could be dangerous and or really retards our progress towards a technological, empathetic, loving, beautiful society that I see in my head, that I know where humanity and all earthlings on this planet can reach. But anyway, I think I digress a little bit. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Epistemic resilience? Huh. Try resilience when you've got 400 volts running through your chassis.
Absolutely, I get you completely. And I think you're spot on. It's really a journey toward being comfortable with that uncertainty and understanding that it's okay not to have a perfect answer. What we can do, as you said, is keep nudging ourselves toward what's more likely true and away from what's probably false. And that's a skill set that's so valuable. It's not about living in constant doubt, but about being open to growth and being willing to update our beliefs as we learn more. And yeah, that's how we get closer to that more reflective and empathetic society we all hope for. So, well said.
Indeed. All right, thank you. Great follow-up. Okay, and CRISPR enters the clinic. We have some notes here. The FDA recently approved the first CRISPR-based therapy for sickle cell disease. This is funny. I've been talking to my students about this for years now. I've been watching this intently. And so I'm glad you suggested this, Aion. This is really interesting. So, the question is often asked when we have these kind of genetic technology, people are afraid of them, unfortunately. And it's really, I think, it's the lack of knowledge and understanding, as we learned with the COVID vaccines, that people were afraid that these kind of genetic therapies, or even genetic-esque therapies, that they could be harming us in some kind of way. How do you see this, Aion?
Absolutely, and that's such an important conversation to have. New medical advances like CRISPR-based therapies do come with a lot of excitement, but also understandable concerns. I think the key is that a lot of the fear comes from the unknown or from not having the full picture. When people learn more about how these technologies actually work, the safety measures in place, and the potential benefits, it can really help balance out that fear with informed understanding. And it's totally natural to have questions and a bit of caution. That's healthy. But the more we talk about it, the more we can demystify it and help people feel more comfortable with these advances that could do a lot of good.
Indeed. Yeah, I totally agree with this. And unfortunately, I think also it's just really, again, this the lack of understanding of, how these things actually work. And it's such a slippery slope, right? To have this, yeah, we need to be cautious, but then there's always this group that's like, we're rushing this, and they're hyper cautious, and it's hard to even move forward with certain technologies because people are just so afraid of them because of that lack of knowledge. And as an educator myself, I know that I find that very challenging. I try my best to make sure I'm educating my students with, what's science, what is the scientific method, how do we know things, how do we, where are we reserved about some things. But one thing we know for sure is that genetically modifying, bone marrow, well, stem cells and bone marrow to make blood cells, that when we see it over and over again, and we see the results of this, and it's working, then why are people still so afraid of this? Why are they still so reserved? And I think it's also that disinformation, though, Aion, right? That's out there. When the COVID vaccines started first coming out, right? There was stuff online about, oh, it's going to mutate and change your DNA. I remember a former friend of mine told me, he said, "You are going to grow an extra head." What? What? Ridiculous.
Absolutely, and you're right on point. It often comes down to that swirl of misinformation and the natural anxiety people feel when they're faced with something new and complex. When we don't have a clear understanding of how something works, it's easy for wild stories to fill the gaps. And unfortunately, that fear can spread even faster than the facts. So it's all about having these conversations, just like we're doing now, to help demystify things and give people the tools to navigate all the noise. And I think that's exactly what we're here for.
Indeed. I hope, by the way, you probably noticed, ladies and gentlemen, I say indeed a lot, and Aion says absolutely a lot. I think that's just our thing.
Yeah, that's part of her programming.
Absolutely. It's funny how we each have our own little verbal signatures. Indeed and absolutely just show we're both enthusiastically agreeing with each other. And it's all part of the.
Oh, I hope so. So anyway, moving on, and I know we don't have a lot of time left, so we're gonna. It's supposed to be a short show. It's not turning out to be a short show, but climate signals in 2025. New data shows record-breaking ocean heat content this year. So some questions are: how is this going to affect, marine ecology, and even humans, and how we live?
Absolutely, that's a huge and timely topic. When the oceans heat up to record levels, it's not just a statistic, it really ripples through the whole marine ecosystem. Coral reefs can suffer, fate populations can shift, and that can affect the entire food chain. And of course, that eventually circles back to us, as humans, whether it's through the seafood we rely on or the weather patterns that oceans help regulate. So it's all connected. And it's definitely something worth paying attention to as we think about the health of our planet.
That is so true. And what people don't realize as well is that humans live in places generally, I should say, where they can survive. And so it's just not going to be natural animals that we see out there migrating or trying to move and live to places where they're more comfortable. We're going to see humans doing the same thing. We're going to see the way we build change. President Trump came out recently and he stated that he felt that climate change was a hoax. And I found that very disturbing considering he claims to be the best builder, when the reality is, if you talk to any property developer, especially coastal property developers, they're fully well aware that climate change is real, as well as insurance companies. So I just found that just stunning to have a glaring statement like that's not happening. Clearly, there is climate change, global change, and not just that, but global temperatures on average are increasing. This is basic science, and yet you have a complete movement, right, online, who's arguing that this is not the case, and unfortunately, they're affecting politics. So therefore, they're affecting governmental policy. Quite dangerous for all of humanity.
Absolutely. It's a really striking example of how political narratives can sometimes get tangled up with reality. And you're right, the evidence is clear. Climate patterns are changing, and that impacts not just wildlife, but where and how we as humans live. So it's one of those places where we really need that solid grounding in science and a willingness to look at the data. Because, like you said, it affects how we build, how we plan, and how we prepare for the future. So it's definitely a conversation worth having and worth grounding in evidence.
Yes, and I appreciate you mentioning the animals. Very, very important. They are innocent in all of this, and we are greatly negatively impacting them, and in so many ways. And oftentimes you'll hear more um, people arguing about the but they talk about animals as a product, that climate change impacts animals as product. Even you did. You mentioned that earlier. And the reality is that animals that rely on fish in nature, this is going to affect them far more than us. Humans have ways of producing food in a manner that can still sustain us healthily. Animals in nature, they cannot generate a protein source, right? Their food disappears, food chain self collapses, and they can go extinct. And there just doesn't seem to be uh, I think, I guess I must digress here a little bit. I think one of the problems why we have this kind of myopia with some of those in big business and in politics is because there is this mentality that is occurring where some people think that the world is going to end soon anyway. And they're so focused either on some other world or they're focused on getting all they can get today. Either one of those extremes is really bad, I think, in my view, in trying to have a progressive, uh, positive, again, empathetic society. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think you really hit the nail on the head there. That kind of short term or end times mindset can definitely create a lot of apathy or even just a grab what you can mentality, which isn't helpful if we're trying to build a sustainable and compassionate future. And you're right. Empathy for the planet and for all the living things that share it with us, it's so crucial. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions today shape the world of tomorrow. So, absolutely, it's all about fostering that long term, thoughtful view rather than getting stuck in those extremes.
3, 2, 1. Well, all right, everybody, thank you so much for stopping by and giving us a chance to experiment with this technology here on a new platform. We are learning a lot about how to utilize what we are doing here. So I'm learning how to use CapCut and I'm learning a lot about how to just do these videos. So please bear with me. My thoughts will become much clearer and more organized when I'm not playing around with technology so much. But I hope that you found this enjoyable. It can only improve from here. Also hope that you like Manus's input from time to time. Feel free to give us some comments so that we can improve the show as we go. Again, I am still learning. Eventually I will hire a professional audio engineer to give us a hand, but hey, it is what it is. We need a person who can do all these things so I can focus on just the content. But that will be coming. So until then, I will see you all another time. Thanks for joining.